Hello everyone, my name is Torrin Leonard, and in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to create a 3D model NFT collection using Blender. To do this, we're going to be using an open source add-on I created called Blend My NFTs, and you can find this add-on on this GitHub page. This link will be in the description, and when you get to this page, the first thing you're going to want to do is click this green code button here, and then click Download Zip. Now this will download the software to a zip file. Before we go there, I just want to say that this in that zip file there's this file called readme.md. Now in this readme file is everything that's displayed here on this page, and there's a very detailed description and documentation of how to use this software to not only generate 3D models but also animations and images, as well as metadata and a few other neat features that help you generate an NFT collection. So please read this. There's a lot of documentation here about a lot of features and how to use them. I spent a lot of time working on this, so please read it over. And yeah, there's also a link to our Discord server in the description of this video. We'll be there asking questions, and there's a really nice community there that would love to answer some questions if you have any difficulty setting this up. But for right now, let's minimize this, and let's take this Blend My NFT zip file and move it to our desktop. So for this tutorial, I'm going to be using WinRAR to unzip my folder. And now that we have Blend My NFTs on our desktop, we don't need that zip file anymore. Let's go ahead and open this up here. So this is Blend My NFTs, and there are a lot of folders to go over, so I'll keep this brief. This is the example.blend file that's been provided to you to help people understand how Blend My NFTs works. So before we open that, let's go to source here and click on config. Now config is the file where every setting that you want to change about your NFT collection will be located. So anything that you want to change, anything at all, will be here in this file. So let's go over a couple of the ones that we're going to be needing to create a 3D model NFT collection. So the first one obviously is going to be our NFT name. So for this example, let's do spheres and cubes. We're going to be generating a number at the end of this, so when our 3D models are saved, there will be a incrementing number. So if you generate, say, 10 NFTs, each file will be saved with a number in that name. So just if you want to separate it with a dash or an underscore, then this would be the place to do that. So now that we have the name of our NFT, let's scroll down here and go to model file format. Now this is pretty important. This determines the extension for our 3D models. Blender supports FBX, JLB, OBJ, and X3D. There's a list here for a complete, there's a link here for a complete list of 3D model files supported by Blender if you're curious. But for now, for this tutorial, I'm just going to be looking at JLB. These file formats here, this is for image file format and animation file format. These are for generating images and animations. We won't be using that in this tutorial, as this is only a 3D model demonstration. But yeah, if check out the YouTube channel. I'm sure there will be more tutorials about these in the future. But for now, let's look at this save path windows variable right here, and this is going to be the save path to our Blend My NFTs folder. So let's minimize this. We'll go back here to this Blend My NFTs folder. Let's right here. Let's click on this white space here and go Control C. This just copies the location of Blend My NFTs. I have it located on my D drive in my desktop. So let's go back here and click Control V. And if you're wondering what I'm changing this all in, this is the a VS Code integrated development environment. Now VS Code is free, and it's provided by Microsoft, so you can find this online. This is just the IDE that I'm using to change the config.py file. There's also a text editor in Blender that you can use, but it's not as good, and if you're looking at doing programming in the future, I recommend just getting familiar with Visual Studio Code. So that's why I'm using it in this tutorial here. But there's a whole host of other things that you can use. Even a basic text editing software like Google Docs or something could work. I don't know if Google Docs would work, but I'm sure there's something out there that you can use. So let's move on here. We have max NFTs here. Now this limits the total number of our NFTs that we're going to be generating. So for this tutorial, I'm going to be setting this to 10. Now NFTs per batch, this is another important number. I'll set this to 5. Now what this does is it splits up the NFTs, the maximum number of NFTs that we set, so that we can manage it a little better. So let's say you're generating 10,000 NFTs and you want to split it up into batches of 500 so that your computers can render or export those individually instead of as just one big group. It limits the failure rate. So if you're saying, let's say you generate 10,000 at once, you're going to be a lot more frustrated if that render fails, and there's a higher chance that that will fail. So then the failure chance of just rendering 500 in clumps. So if a 500 batch fails, then you're going to be you're going to be saving a lot more time with just rendering that batch than you are just with one big 10,000 NFT collection. So that's the purpose of batches. You'll see a little bit more of this in the future as I talk through this tutorial. Now this render batch here is the number, the batch number that we're going to be rendering or exporting as a 3D model in this case. So the batches are all incremented from 1 to however many that are generated from these numbers here. So I'll set this to 1 right now because let's just do 1 for this example. This variable I'll come back to, but right now let's just change this to true. So we're just turning on the 3D model generator here. And that's all we're going to touch. So we've done everything that needs to be done. These are all very important. Please don't forget to fill any of these out or the software might not work. So let's let's minimize that and let's go back to Blend My NFTs main here and click on this example.blend file. Now this is just an example I provided. If you want to use Blend My NFTs with your own software, I recommend that you do, and you probably want to. So to do that, you'll have to move your Blender file into Blend My NFTs, into the Blend My NFTs folder. It's just a way that the directories work. It's a complicated thing to explain, but Blender doesn't. It has a weird way of handling file directories. So this is the only way that I can get it to work. So your blend.blend file needs to be in this Blend My NFTs main folder. So now that we have that example file open, it will open up to this tab in Blender called scripting. Now scripting is a really important tab for this tutorial. We're going to be opening up, we're going to click this open button here and open up Blend My NFTs. Let's go to desktop, just locate that folder here. Now we have it in this Blender file view. Let's go to source and we're going to open main. So main.py is the file that you're going to be running in Blender. It is responsible for all the operations and determining which files and which scripts to run correctly. So this is the main file we're going to be rendering here. This is the scene. I'm just going to talk a bit about the scene collection. So in the scene collection, we have a whole bunch of collections. We have the script ignore, cube, severe, area light, text, curve, point light. The most important one is script ignore. Now script ignore is the collection that contains everything that you want constant in your NFT scene. So let's say that you have an NFT where there's a person wearing a hat and he's in front of a background. So that background stays the same for every single one of your NFTs that you want to generate. You would put that background in this script ignore collection right here. Now this script ignore name needs to be exactly script ignore. It needs to be capital S underscore capital I ignore. So it's just the way the program reads the collections and it knows which ones to keep. So yeah, just another note about that. All the camera settings in here will be saved. So if you change anything in here, those will be maintained throughout the generation process. So if you forget to turn on your background, the background will not be generated. So now we've talked about script ignore. Let's move on to these other collections here. And let me explain a bit about what they do. So these collections, I'll call them attributes. And an attribute is something in your NFT collection that can change. So going back to our example with the person with the hat, the hat, let's say the hat is one of our attributes, and many different hats can be put in there. So you have maybe one NFT has the person wearing some green hat, and the other one has the person wearing a red hat. So the hat itself, the idea of the hat being swappable in and out, that is the collection called, well, in this example it's cube, but for just for the example, let's pretend this is hat. So this is our hat collection. We would call it hat, and in this collection would be all those different types of hats. So here we have hat 1, and this could be maybe the green hat. Let's change this because this is getting confusing. Let's say green hat, and this is our hat collection, and this is hat number 2. So this, let's say this is red hat. So this is our red hat, and we have 2 more hats here, whatever. So the naming for these things down here, these different types of hats, are variants. So these are called variants, and the name of these collections is pretty important. This needs to follow this exact structure. So this string right here, these letters, is the name of your one variant, your green hat. Now, the name can be anything. It just can't include numbers or underscores or symbols. It needs to include only letters, capital or lowercase. So it's just how the script reads the collections and the difference between attributes and variants. For more details about the structures of this collection, I recommend reading the README file on our GitHub page. As I mentioned before, I've spent a lot of time working on this. There's a lot of information here in this README file, so please feel free to go over it. There's a lot of useful stuff there. So yeah, I'm going to close this now, and if you're looking for more information, go to that README file or the Discord server. So let's move on. So we've talked a bit about the collections now, and let's run the script. So if you remember, we set everything up here. We have our save path, we set all these variables here, and the name, the model file format. Let's run the script and see what happens. All right, so we ran the script, and we can see down here in the left-hand corner that the script was run successfully. There's a blue check mark here, and all the objects in our scene are gone. So let's see what happened. Let's minimize Blender, and you'll notice in the Blend My NFTs main folder, there's a new file called NFT record. We can also go over here to this batch JSON file and click and open it. And we will see that there are 2 new JSON files that have been made, batch 1 and batch 2. Let's just recap what we did. So we ran the Blend My NFTs main.py script in Blender, and what that did was it generated 3 files. It generated NFT record and batch 1 and batch 2 JSON files. So this is just an overview and a summary. These are just storing data representing the NFTs that will be generated. So it randomly selects a combination of the Blender variants that we have here in our collection, and it combines them into those DNA strings I just showed you right here. And then the program, when we run it next, will generate the 3D models with these DNA. So if you want more information about how it works, please read the README file. It's a bit technical, but if you want to understand it a little better, I recommend doing that. But for right now, this is just an overview. So let's go back to our config file here. Now we just ran with enable exporter turned off. So let's set this to true and turn enable exporter on. and let's see what happens. Now we're gonna run blend my NFTs, the main.py file in Blender again. So let's run it and see what happens. All right, so the script finished successfully, thankfully, and let's see what happens. So we notice that these objects are now visible. Let's minimize out of that and go back to our blend my NFTs main folder here. And if we go to NFT output _output, we'll notice that this batch1 folder was created here. Now let's click in this, and there's another folder in here called models. I'll explain more about the folder structure in a bit, but let's open this up and see what we have. Well, look at that. We have 5 unique models that were generated here. So let's go ahead. I'm going to open Blender here, and I'm going to open a new file, just general, and let's save that. Sure. So let's delete everything in this scene and see what we have there. So Blender has a weird way of importing 3D models, as I'm sure you're aware. So I'm going to open up a JLB file. Let's go to desktop, blend my NFTs main, and NFT output, batch1, models, and let's just see what we created. So look at that. It generated combinations of the NFTs, of the 3D models that we saw there, and that's awesome. So let's delete these and let's take a look at another one. All right, let's just do the same thing here. Open this up, go to 5 this time, and look at that, it's different. So that's pretty cool. Now this is just an example and it doesn't look very impressive, but it's just to prove the concept to you. Now, let's go ahead and generate one more batch. So in this example, we generated batch 1, and that's all cool, but you want to probably generate 2 batches or 3 or however many batches you want to generate. So let's open example again and run this script again. But first, before we do that, let's go to Visual Studio Code and change this render batch to number 2. Now what this is doing is telling Blender to no longer look at this batch for NFT information, but it will instead look at this batch for NFT information. So we haven't rendered this one. We haven't generated this one yet. We've generated batch 1. Now we're moving on to batch 2. And you can increment this as many times as you want, as many batches as you have. So let's say you have 100 NFT DNA that you want to create, and you want 10 batches. So you would split 100 up into 10 batches by changing this number here into max NFTs to 100, and then set this to 10. So there would be 10 NFTs per each batch of 100. So there would be 10 batches. Now, I'm not going to do this, so let's change this back to what we had before. Now we have selected batch number 2, and we have the enable models Blender set to true and enable exporter to true. So let's go ahead and run this again, see what happens. All right, there we go. The script ran again successfully, and the models are now showing. Let's go back here, go back to NFT output, and now we have this batch number 2. So let's click on this, do this again, and we can see that these 3D models have been generated. So if we open this, we can see that it's been generated here. And if we go to another one, it looks different. It has a cyan cube there. This one doesn't even have a cube at all. This one has a white cube and a blue curve right there, and text number 2. This one has a red cube, and I'm just showing off basic primitive shapes here, but yeah, that's the full tutorial for how to generate 3D models using Blend My NFTs. Right now, I'm gonna just talk about metadata, because I'm sure when you generate your NFTs like this, you'll want to generate metadata as well as the 3D models. So let's go back here. I'm going to delete these 2 examples right here. Close this, and let's talk about metadata. So when you upload your NFTs to some minting machine or some minting service to be put on a blockchain, they're probably going to ask you for a JSON file that will include information about your NFTs. Now, I've coded Blend My NFTs to sort of generate a template for that metadata so that you don't have to. Now, this metadata feature can be found here on line 94 in config.py. And you can activate it by just setting this to true. So let's change this to true. And down here you can see that we have 4 types of metadata that you can generate and export as. So we have default, which just exports some basic some basic information about our NFT collection and the 3D models that we just exported. It's created by me. It's not a standard at all, so just keep that in mind when you choose that. We also have ADA, which is Cardano, the links of which to all these standards can be found here, and the sources of where I got those standards from. They should be from some pretty big formats and standards that are used throughout the blockchains here. So we have, currently we support Cardano, Solana, and Ethereum ERC 721. So for this example, I'm going to be showing off the Solana format there, and I'm just going to copy and paste this word or this string right here into these quotation marks. And this will just tell the program which format to export the metadata as. And if you want to look over the metadata or change it in any way and add your own format, you can go to this metadata.py file here, and you can find all of the metadata types here. Here we have default, we have Solana right there, we have Cardano and ERC 721, and you can go ahead in here and add another format if you feel like you want to. So we've set that, we've set Solana, we've set true, and let's go ahead, we'll go right back to Blender, and because we have already generated the NFT record and the batches, we no longer have to do anything. Let's change the batch to render to 1 and go back here, and now we're in Blender again. Let's just click run. And there we go, it ran successfully. It always brightens my day when that happens. So let's go to NFT output here in Blend My NFTs folder and click on batch 1. So now you'll notice that we have 2 files in this batch 1 folder. We have the models folder and the NFT metadata folder. Now, as you probably have guessed by now, this is where the metadata for these models are basically. So let's go in here. We can just quickly go over. We have 5 3D models that were generated here. And let's go back up here and go to NFT metadata. And we'll see here that 5 metadata have been generated for each NFT 3D model that was created there. So let's go ahead and open up number 1 and see what we have. So this is the standard Solana NFT metadata stuff, and we can see here these are all the attributes for sphere and cubes 1. So that's pretty much it for metadata. You can play around with it some more. You can generate hundreds, thousands of 3D models like that. I hope you enjoyed. And yeah, there are a lot of more tutorials on our YouTube channel. As I said before, we have an amazing Discord community. They'd love to help out. I will also be there doing live streams occasionally and answering questions. So if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. And yeah, just a quick note before we leave. This video could be possibly out of date by the time you're watching it. So if you notice that this number right here is greater on your website than it is on this one here, then you might want to check out another YouTube tutorial on our YouTube channel that will have some more updated information. If that video doesn't exist, there's also more information here on the README file that will be of greater use than the lack of a video. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you found it useful and you can generate a 3D model NFT collection now. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching.